I got lucky and I saw what a focused agent looks like. So I think many people are working with an anti-pattern of distracted agent, which is basically you're like, hey AI, here's my rules, and also do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, and they're like, oh, and when it messes up, you just add another one to that, right? And nobody pays attention. Like, does it actually do the thing you asked? And usually, what you see is the answer is no.
I'm Rebecca Murphy, and this is Engineering Unblocked. Engineering Unblocked is brought to you by Swarmia, the engineering intelligence platform that's trusted by some of the best software companies in the world, including startups like Superhuman, scale-ups like Miro, and companies from the Fortune 500. On today's show, I'm talking to Lada Kesseler, lead developer and technical coach at Logic 2020. I reached out to Lada after watching an amazing workshop she gave about mapping the uncharted territory of AI. And one of the attendees said, Lada, this isn't just another Gen AI tutorial, it's a compass for those of us who aim to design intelligent systems, not just use them. Thank you for mapping what usually stays in the shadows, the judgment behind the code. And that's a pretty strong recommendation. So I hope that you will be able to learn some things today from Lada. So Lada, welcome.
Hi, Rebecca. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I appreciate the introduction.
Yeah. Anything else that you want to say about who you are or anything like that?
Oh yeah, so like I said, I'm a software developer, and I think of myself as a crafter, in that like I'm trying to build systems that work really well, but also the systems that also solve the right problem and kind of make users happy. So I kind of like UX aspects of things as well, and my roots are really in like the deep agile, like the early agile. So I think about this as extreme programming, right? So the TDD, refactoring, domain-driven design, like evolutionary design. And I've been kind of, like we mentioned, acting as technical coach on my projects, and currently kind of trying to explore what all of those values mean in this new territory of AI, right? How do we apply this to AI? How do we write system that is good and reliable and delight our customers with this unreliable tool that lies to us and breaks and all kinds of like madness going on, right? So then kind of trying to naturally share knowledge, what I learned about it. And like the ways I do this is like the talks, and like nowadays people ask me to do master classes and all of that. Yeah.
Yes, let's not forget that you too can have a class from Lada if you would like. So what I really liked about your workshop, first, I loved the map. There was a literal map of kind of the AI landscape, and it really focuses on, you detailed obstacles, patterns, and anti-patterns in a few different areas. But it started from 5 gaps that we already, I think everybody recognizes regarding AI. And just wondering if you can talk about those 5 gaps and what you, like, how you arrived at those.
Yeah, that's actually a perfect starting point, I think, because I've like the way I've been thinking about this is, so it feels like we're in a new territory. It feels like the rules of the land changed enough that we kind of need to question our assumptions and learn. And I think the best way to do this is to actually try to do things and kind of observe what we see, right? So this is where I'm coming from. So I come to these patterns by basically observing my pains, right? So it's a lot of hands-on experience for me, right? This year I've been just doing so much hands-on coding and writing agents and whatnot with it. And what I saw, like some of the things are like, well, this tool, I keep repeating myself and it's really annoying. Why is that? Well, this thing cannot learn, right? When I talk to a junior developer, they're usually sharp. They're usually sharp people, and they usually know what I told them the day before. Not the case with agentic AI, right? So we kind of need to build like those knowledge, like build those systems knowledge, right? And like, how do we build this knowledge? And this is like, I think about my talk, like I think you perfectly started with obstacles, absolutely. I think about this as basically 3 hikes. And the hikes are around context management. And the obstacles are basically those mountains we have to walk around, right? We can't do anything, but we have to figure out how to get to where we want around those things. And then we have a kind of non-deterministic, right? So the next bit is non-determinism. And basically, well, the same input doesn't mean the same output, right? You give it the same input and now it suddenly does something else. Well, it's a bug in the feature. We can maybe exploit it as well, because like you can actually try it several times. It's like throwing a die, right? You throw a die. If you want a 3, like maybe you throw it 12 times and then one of them will be a 3. And like, there's also like amazing opportunities around combining the solutions like this and so on. So I'll show that. So the non-determinism bit is like there's a plethora of patterns, and not just this obstacle. Like there's many obstacles together. They kind of mean our reactions to them needs to be a certain way. And then the last bit is about communication, right? So we have something that is very mysterious. So like we open code and we see what the code does. No mystery there. If you just need to know a little bit. But like with AI, it has like an approximation of mental model there. And like that mental model is often hidden. Like you can't really know. And so like any misconceptions there, like kind of detrimental. So I show like how it's like I keep telling it things to do it a thing, and it's like, yeah, I'm doing this, but in the end I see that it actually misunderstood me entirely and didn't ask me a question. So that's like the second problem there is compliance bias, right? So it's trained deliberately to say yes, to say you're amazing, you're right, and so on. Like I have a pain pointer out, you're right, I think I need therapy. You're absolutely right is like a triggering phrase for me, right? So like you have to fight that, right? So how do you communicate to it in a way to get better results from it? And there's absolutely ways to do this better than just like people give it commands instead of like doing back and forth. And back and forth makes you so much more powerful because you can not just, it is basically, I think about it as an instrument of vision. Like I'm at a point where I need to make a decision. I can make one decision, but if I ask it, it's so well read. It knows more than I know. So I can fish for what's the universe of possible answers here in front of me, a small scale. So it's like a little experiment or a little like, and this is just so much more powerful. This is what I call reverse direction. Yeah. So this is how I kind of think about those things.
So those are pretty fundamental challenges. And I think like anybody who's using AI for software development is running into every single one of those. And I also am highly triggered by you're absolutely right. And I'm constantly frustrated that AI won't ask me a clarifying question.
Yes.
And that's, anyway, we can talk about our wish list for AI.
Yeah. We have a long one.
So how do you create a system where AI, this is a simple question, how can you create a system where AI can be beneficial and not detrimental given those challenges?
So you kind of start from the learning what it is, I think, right? And what learning what it is actually empowers you to do better. Because, for example, I can give one example that I see many people doing kind of the way that I think hurts them, which is I got lucky and I saw what a focused agent looks like. So I think many people are working with an anti-pattern of distracted agent, which is basically you're like, hey, AI, here's my rules. And also do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And they're like, oh, and when it like messes up, you just add another one to that, right? And nobody pays attention. Like, does it actually do the thing you asked? And usually what you see is the answer is no. Like, why is that? And I saw something fantastic once, like by luck, right? Sheer luck, which is I have a little committer that is dedicated to committing. And both little committer and my main AI I code with have the same ground rules. And the ground rules are be proactive, warn me about issues before they become a problem, and so on, right? And suddenly, this little committer that has only one little focus of committing starts to warn me about issues. Well, the main one didn't ever. And so the difference is between always and never. It's nuts, right? It's crazy. And yet I see so many people not understanding this fundamental difference of there's a concept of focus in the AI, right? So it's not just context, there's a context, and like if we can increase context window to infinity, we'll be so happy. No, because really it has a concept of focus and it feels like it can only pay attention to one thing very well. But knowing that means that we can design around that, right? Because now, look, so I added a few patterns after this talk that you saw, and that's around AI slop, right? So AI slop is like, the simple recipe is like give prompts to AI, maybe lightly edit it, and then present it as its own work, right? I don't want to be like judgy here, but I want to say a simple thing. Like one pass with AI doesn't work. It doesn't actually produce good results for anything more complex than a simple question, right? So, but knowing that empowers you to actually do better, right? Because now I have a pattern, I can counter it. So I have a pattern of feedback loop. You can just have one AI criticize another AI, and the difference would be stark. Surprisingly, the same AI criticizing its own work also works amazing, and I'm not convinced it works worse. Why is that? That is a question, because now you see that you thought you gave AI a task and you said, and do this. And we thought it wasn't good at writing good code. It just wasn't good at all these things. But it's not the case. When you ask to do this as a primary task, it's amazing at that. It can tell you all the things that are wrong with your code. Why didn't it do it? I think we're going into focus. This is how you think about, this is how you figure out what systems we need. And I think we don't know the tools we have, we need. The tools we have are very bad. They're limiting me every way. And that's how you figure out. So that's how I approach it.
So at Swarmia, we talk a lot about best practices in software engineering, and you work at a consulting company. So I'm sure you also spend a lot of time talking about best practices in software engineering. And we've talked about, I have known my lines for a long time, that we talk about limiting work in progress and having small batch sizes and finishing what you start and maybe only working on one thing at a time. Do those rules still make sense? Or do we need to re-examine them?
So I think re-examining everything is a good idea right now, because it's seriously changed so much. But I think I've been doing that. So I've been asking myself a very hard question to somebody who cares deeply about software craftsmanship, which is software craftsmanship even better if we just can regenerate all the code? And the answer is a resolute yes, because those agents, what I see them doing is they basically code themselves into a wall at full speed. So what you see in teams that don't know how to do proper system design, and the principles that actually make maintainable software, they just code themselves into a wall at super speeds. And that's a problem when you're dealing with something that needs to be reliable and harming the customers, right? You don't want that. And many other things. So I see the craftsmanship principles, for example, in code. AI, when you put it in a good code base, it actually replicates goodness. Right? It will still degrade. You have to but if you start from good, it will less likely to make messes. And for example, if you actually leave bad code, old code, code that's not used, that's detrimental completely, because it will find it, it will try to edit it, and hey, I've done the work. I'm no, you didn't. Why? And it's my fault at this point, because I let it degrade to this point, right? So you kind of have to find those and be merciless about deleting them. And all of these other things, the focus part, right? What you mentioned about is it important to do small batches of extremely, because AI is not managing complexity right now. I think it's the most crucial question right now. It's can it eventually manage complexity? Because the difference between yes and no here is we need to build a system that writes other systems for us, and we don't even need to be mentally involved. That's one kind of universe we're going to live in, if that's the case. I'm not convinced right now. But another universe is we still need to understand what this thing does. At some point, a human needs to be involved, and maybe we can zoom out and work on a higher level, and it can empower us, but we still need to be involved. That's a different system entirely, and nobody tries to solve this, because the big problem that I think we're facing here is AI adopted the pull request model. So basically, I can design with it, and its back and forth feels very collaborative. But then it goes and does the coding, and the coding is a diff, right? And this is where my mental model of what's inside my software just degrades, right? I don't know what it does. I have to invest a lot of my time to understand it. And nobody tries to be how do we collaborate, right? Or at least I don't want to say nobody does it. I don't see people thinking about it and talking about it, and I see a lot of systems that kind of try to do the same thing, but I think the core issues are around that. So I think we kind of need to, this is the pain point, right? It's a massive one. We need to solve it somehow, and we need to observe and see what we can do to learn. And I think everything else we learned about agile, about how to work efficiently, small batches, right? Managing complexity. So I have to manage it can't manage complexity, so I have to do it, right? How do I do it? I chop it up into small pieces. The ridiculous things sometimes, because AI is not software, to the degree that I gave it a small task. So I gave it, it wasn't a small task, to be fair. I have 180 slides, right, on the first talk. And I'm look at every slide and make me a textual representation in Markdown of what the slide is about in a certain format, right? Simple. The one thing that my software had never done before is came to me and said, "Oh, that's too much. I'm going to cut corners." This software doesn't do that stuff, and I like that. But like the codecs that I used codecs for a reason. Codecs, supposedly, everybody was like, the latest codecs is like GPT-5 codecs model from Anthropic, right? From OpenAI. It's like so good at being thorough. It's much more thorough than Claude, blah, blah, blah. Oh my God, this model was like, oh, you have 180 slides? No, I'm just going to cut. I'm not just going to, I'll do 10. And then I'm just going to be like, oh, I'll just write a script here and I'll just like, and the results are horrid, like absolutely. So forcing this thing to just look at every 180 slides is ridiculously hard, right? Something you never face with it. So this is where managing complexity, chopping it small pieces, you need to know this stuff. So you have to give it things in small increments and small pieces. Absolutely relevant.
You talked about kind of software as a craft. And I think at this level, like, yes, everything you just said is correct. I agree with you at this level. How precious should we be about, if we're doing everything you just said and creating relatively small diffs, how precious should we be about what's in those diffs versus writing tests to make sure that the diff does what it should?
It depends on what you're building, right? Big time. This is where, like, I think of vibe coding versus craft, like the manual work where you know every line of code as a dimension now. So previously we just had this little piece where we need to know every line. That's the way to do the things. Now there's a dimension. And vibe coding is the edge of that dimension. But like, depending on the difficulty of what you're facing with, right? How important what you're producing is to not break, how big it is, how complex. You're going to have to use judgment to be like, I need to look deeper or not deeper, right? And I absolutely have been exploring all kinds of, like, I've been playing with it very deliberately. Like, what can I get away with, right? And some things that are, so I see a lot of people who are at edges of this thing, right? They're like, I only will work at this. Like, they try to be like, there's a monster under the bed. If I pretend long enough, it'll go away, right? I learned early on that, like, I think in this case it won't happen because it changed enough in my work that I think we will never go back to working the old way. And I think it's a good thing. Although I love I love my work. I still love my work. I still love working software. But like the edge, right? There's vibe coders, and that's fine. And I see people like here not vibe coding sometimes where they should be. Like, I think they should be vibe coding little tools. They should be vibe coding custom things that give them answers about problem space. That's the thing where you can get so much benefit, and you can just empower yourself to like crazy. But like the extreme of vibe coding is like productionize the system, like productional system vibe coded to production where you care about your customers. Oh God, please don't do this, right? You're going to shoot yourself in the leg. You're going to lose trust of your people. You're going to code yourself in the situation where you can't code yourself out because you need to have engineering skills here. At some point, the complexity is such that you just can't get away with this, right? So this is where it depends, right? And it depends to the degree. The benefits are real and amazing. Like I've done this. So we did a real impact on Agile 2025 with a group of like technical coaches and other people, like product people. We had an amazing team. There was like awesome crafters of Seattle, software crafters, Llewellyn Falco, there's Woody Zool, and like we had a group of like 10 people, creator of Fast Agile, and we tried to take a real problem for people, and solve it in 3 days. And also show how to do it with good Agile practices, right? Not bureaucratic, but like self-organized team, fast Agile. And this is why we succeeded, I think. That's the core of why I succeeded. We were solving the right problem. It was scoped well, and we worked with the customer very closely. But if we didn't use AI, we just wouldn't have time, right? And this is such a small thing. And the people who came to us didn't need more than that. But we solved 2 problems, which nobody thought we would. We solved 2 problems for them, not 1. And like, we were like, oh, 2 is too ambitious. We can probably just do 1. No, we had ambitious people among us. They're like, let's do both because we want to. This is a real thing that makes real difference for children who are facing abuse. Let's try to get them funding, and we solved both problems with AI in the end, but not because of AI. It was empowering the skills we had, right? Not like the solution. But we got them real funding, and the fact that like we did this, right? It's making a real difference. That's just so satisfying.
Yeah, and I find myself writing more software than I've written in years.
Absolutely.
I've been in leadership for too many years, um, and even my current job doesn't don't call on me to write code much, but I've been writing a ton. So I think there's also that, like, at a for a somebody who's maybe no longer in an engineering role, it can provide so much value because, again, I understand what good enough code looks like, and I understand what bad code looks like, and this is my personal tool. So, like, we're very much on the vibe coding end of the spectrum. I want to talk about another best practice. You mentioned it up at the top, TDD and testing and all of that. The 2025 Dora report, I don't know if you've seen it, but it really, like, talks a lot about how AI is an amplifier. And so if you're good, it will make you better. If you're bad, it's going to possibly hurt you more than it helps. And that could be in terms of quality or reliability or just emphasizing a bottleneck that you already had.
Yeah, I really agree with that.
So one thing I'm noticing, kind of as a result of that realization, is that companies suddenly want to, or are willing to at least consider, spending time and money on things they should have always been doing.
Yes.
But what are other things, like testing is an obvious one, more documentation is another obvious one, but what are other kind of things that they've always been good practices, but now they're essential?
Yeah, I think in general, like you need an engineer in there right now who knows what they're doing, guiding those things, right? And the engineer is there to manage complexity and like design. Because think about, you have a problem space, you have a solution space. With AI, if you have nobody owning that solution space, then it degrades, right? Because AI cannot maintain this. It can't like think about all the level right now, right? At least it doesn't. Maybe we can build a system that does it. Like TDD is an absolute awesome thing. Like you mentioned, I love TDD with AI. I have my own process that I wrote that works really well, and like a few people have been spreading it around. Seems to work well for them. And what it does, it gives it immediate feedback, and also like I do predictive TDD. So this is like you guess will the test pass or fail before you run it, and that allows you to maintain a mental model of what's happening. And then what you get from that, and AI gets from that too, is you get surprised when it's not the case. You're like, oh no, I misunderstood. And that can allow that very small feedback. Like this is small feedback loops. Small feedback loops are essential to any kind of management, right? Any kind of going where you want to go. So same thing here. I like refactoring quite a lot, right? So I refactor in general. Refactoring is the one superpower that if you don't know how to do right, so there's a lot of developers that just get thrown into the kind of industry, and nobody teaches them some things. And it's not just coding. In the end, it's not just syntax, right? Syntax is just so much less important. So refactoring is a superpower, and it's a way. Some people are rewriting instead of refactoring, just writing parallel code. But refactoring is basically learning the ability of transforming code in your brain in small steps, and then you can basically go however far you want with this, and that allows you to change and modify it where you want it to be, and get to good software from bad software without breaking anything, especially if you have in static language, statically typed language. Like I do crazy things with this. If you master it, like you can do things like I've been dropped into a system of 50 microservices, and that I didn't know. Right in a month, I emerged from that, having changed the architecture of 10 of them in a better way, plus delivering the feature they care about, and saving them a few millions of dollars because I did, right? And improving things without breaking anything. So massive change. What people are like, oh, refactoring, they're gonna break things and so on. No, if you know how, you won't. And you can do this with AI. So I'm kind of figuring out how to do this with AI. Llewellyn Falco has an amazing process file about like refactoring with AI that gets you to the code that is not disgusting. That's not bad, right? So AI writes codes that like most developers are like, oh, cringe. And now you can run this thing. It's automated. It gets you to better. And all of that, like, I think it's all applicable in the end. There's many little places where it's applicable.
You kind of raised an eyebrow when I said documentation. and that more
Yeah.
documentation is necessary. So was that an agreeing or disagreeing eyebrow?
So it's a question, right? Because documentation has always historically been hard because who's maintaining it, right? It's a big problem. Now with AI, actually, documentation becomes much more important. Before, so agile was like we prefer working software over like over bureaucracy. I would call it as initial specifications. And now we're kind of going back a little bit, but like not quite, I think. So some people got kind of developing software in a way that just defines the whole thing, the whole spec. I don't tend to do this. I work much more iteratively in small steps, but I still spec, right? And now my documentation, yes, documentation now is just much more important, the good documentation, and it's more important to keep it in sync, tend to it, and so on. And I have some patterns around how do you not let it degrade and so on. But like we need more around that. Mm-hmm.
I had one project I was playing with, and everything I've done with AI is playing. So this is why I talk to people like you who are doing real things. But I had one project where I actually had a GitHub workflow or whatever they're called, GitHub Action, to run an agent that would review the documentation and make a pull request for anything that had changed. So it wasn't on me to update the documentation anymore. It was kind of self-updating. I'm sure that could be like optimized far beyond what I did, but I think that sort of stuff is really interesting too, where you can just use AI to bake in the practices that you were perhaps avoiding previously because it was just too hard or not perceived as valuable.
Exactly. But you need to know them, right? First, I think to guide AI efficiently. That's why I'm like, I think still like you need to learn engineering practices if you want to write software because the rules didn't change in that lab. It's still software.
Everything that you're saying so far, like, matches pretty well with my understanding and my like what I've come to believe by talking to lots of people like you. On the other hand, I've also talked to people who say our developers don't write code anymore. Like, they don't do that anymore. We like deeply spec the feature up front, maybe with a lovable prototype or something like that, and get customer feedback, and then we make AI build it. And the engineers supervise, but the engineers aren't like, there are also completely autonomous agents in some cases that are just doing the work. What do you think about that?
I think a lot of times we jumping into solutioning before we really understand the problem is the thing I probably have a suspicion there against. And the thing I get from doing it more incrementally is I learn, right? Because the interesting bits about designing things when you start the application is like that's the worst time to design, because this is when you start writing a software for a new problem, this is where you know the least about the problem. And as you're developing solution for it, as you talk to people and kind of start to solve their problem, you start developing the solution space in parallel with this problem space, right? And understanding, like I see so many people skipping that step that is just kind of crazy. Like they just solve their own problem entirely, and they're like, why don't we have happy customers? Yeah, I wonder why. So this is where I'm like, I think I get a lot of knowledge about that, and I think this is where AI actually can help you so much more, because things I've been doing with it is, interestingly, with AI you can start exploring the solution and problem space together without building a single line of code, because the agent actually is kind of a stand-in for code. You can put it, we're not talking about anything reliable. Let's just pretend that we were trying to write a system, right? And we don't know much. So we're trying to kind of replicate it. And instead of code, we're going to use it an agent. And we're going to give it files and instructions. And in and out will be files. You can prototype and learn so much about the problem before you write code. And then you can write code and the code will be better. And you're going like you're shortcutting yourself, right? I think that's where a lot of power is. So I think the people who are speaking up front like this are missing a lot of learning points, but I could be wrong. I recognize I could be wrong. I think I prefer my way, but like I don't write code manually as well. Like when they say don't write code, yeah, I mean I haven't written much code apart from for funsies and like keeping myself up to date. I don't write code really. I do everything with AI, but like I do it a little bit differently maybe than they do.
Yeah, and that is so interesting because I said earlier, like, I'm only creating code because there is AI. Otherwise, I would be unlikely to create code. in my current role. And so I also haven't written any code in a long time. But I still, yeah, I'm still bringing, years of software engineering experience. So hopefully that means something. And yeah, I think I am also skeptical of this, like, agents write all our code for us and we just watch, but it's working for them for right now.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, what happened? But I think the answer might be a year away, right?
There's a chance of that. Yes, I would imagine the answer would come sooner because like it just everything is at super speeds. So it depends. Like, are they able to actually put the quality in and take care of the structure as they go at this crazy speed? Because I think so. I talked to somebody from GitHub, and they were like, we see the most value, people having more value in not just rushing to the answer and building things like speed, right? Speed is just one dimension, but you can reinvest in your own solutions, in the problem space, understanding problem space, in understanding pain points better, in your structure, because you can spend some time with AI refactoring and investing in your product, building yourself tools. There's so much easier and more interesting to kind of know more and to be more efficient. And that is where I think the amazing power is. Like, it's where you can actually make a true difference.
You mentioned earlier that you don't think AI is going away, and I think that's probably true. What do you? One thing I don't want to say I'm worried about, but one thing I can imagine happening is that AI becomes deeply entrenched in processes, perhaps vendor specific. AI becomes deeply entrenched in processes, and usage increases. And at some point, either token costs go up or you're just using so much more of it because they keep making it easier and easier to use. So your prices, I expect the cost that people are paying for AI, companies are paying for AI, will kind of necessarily go up in the next 18, 24 months. I'm curious what your perspective is on the cost angle of this, which is a very popular topic going into 2026.
I don't know that I'm the best person to answer this question. I think what you said makes a lot of sense because as you scale AI, like use it in more places, we will need more of it, right? There's some, I think DeepSeek showed us that maybe the assumptions we had about like we need a lot of money to train those good models are kind of wrong. And I see a lot of local models that are pretty decent as well. And this is where you don't need as much resources, really, right? So I think that's cool. But like, I'm really not an expert at this, so I don't want to predict something that
you're not going to get into the prediction game. I love the prediction game, but that's totally fair. As we wrap up here, are there cases where AI is maybe not the right choice?
I think it's not the AI that's not the right choice. It's like how you use it, not the right choice, right? So like the extreme and bad example is like AI slop, right? That's like what everybody. So when people are like, oh, I write with AI, everybody like nobody says that nowadays, even they do, because like the first assumption that people will make is like, oh, you just tell the AI to write a thing and it just you're reading AI garbage, right? Well, I write with AI, but I don't do it this way at all. And the process is very intensive on my part. There's a lot of work put in. Similar to how I write software with AI, there's a lot of like back and forth. It's crafted, but it's like mentoring me instead of like, like, so this is where like how you use AI is more important than you use AI. I think AI can help you in many, many areas. And I don't know that there's like, I would be a bit worried about like nuclear sector using AI, maybe security. So right, so security in AI is not a solved problem, right? So with agentic AI specifically, right, when you put an agent, like this is where I'm a bit freaking out about, like I don't want to give my data to companies very much right now because they're putting those AI agents without being, and they're so rushed, so then don't worry about security. But I think it only takes like one big blow up and one massive issue, and I'm kind of cringing waiting for that to happen because I think it will. And there's a lot of dangers there, and like don't vibe code again. Same vibe code, but like vibe code, you can vibe code stuff. Like it's if you don't vibe code, you might be hurting yourself. But like production, please be careful what you put in production when you care about the software. Right? You can't do this. So it's balance game, a lot of judgment. Like I see that the judgment is needed here more than ever.
There's such a spectrum of engineers, right? Like there are engineers who like went into engineering almost because they have good judgment and wanted to apply it to that, and then some who have lived a lot of their life as ticket takers and haven't been asked to show judgment or opinions about the product or how it works. How do you think the definition of a software engineer or software developer changes as this becomes the way that we work?
I think it's still a tool, right? And these things are skills, right? So I'm building skills around a new tool we have that has both limitations but also crazy capabilities, and we kind of need to know both. I still find myself guiding it, and I don't know if we're gonna be in the, like I told you, I think there's two possible universes. First universe is like we actually can build a system that builds other systems, in which case like me mentally involved is not important. Or I need to understand, then we need to better tool to how do we make ourselves more powerful instead of just throwing code at a person and thinking that it's okay to be like nobody in software development world wants to be a constant pull request reviewer. It's like torture. It's not working with humans. Like doing with AI slop is like even less enjoyable. I can tell you that.
Two more questions for you. First, what are kind of three things that you want senior leaders to understand about AI?
It's hard because I have a lot, I think, but like I think the biggest one is like so it's called AI, and it has implications. Like we think of it as maybe it's a brain and the whole brain and so on, but like I learned enough to be questioning that assumption right now, and I think it pays a lot by like if you just keep your open mind and learn. Basically learn as much as you can about AI right now. Like empower yourself, make your people not make your people learn, help your people learn, right? And also get good advice from people who know what this is, right? And this is where I see a lot of like the problem is like they go vibe code and like oh it's amazing, like it changes everything. Yeah, but like if you continue the thread, you will find a lot of frustration down the path. At the end, you will be stuck, and some people get yeah, this fun stories and people going all the way because like the AI is like, I am helpless human. I cannot do anything. I'm gonna destroy myself and delete myself from this computer. Serious. So right. So learn about it, like and like if you don't learn about it, how can you make a good decision, right? How do you make good decisions? I think open-mindedness and experimentation is what actually is needed right now. And then I think we need to start with solving the problems we have, because right now, oftentimes when I go to companies, it often looks like solution looking for a problem, right? So, and the easiest way to do this is go to your people and ask, what's your pain point? Like, what is the annoying bits you don't like doing, right? How can we use this there? And the answer is not always use an agent. The answer is often should be, let's use an agent to write software, reliable software, because I see a lot of like, oh, everything is a nail when you have this AI hammer, right? Yeah, and that's kind of it has issues, it has limitations. If you can make something reliable, good God, please do make it reliable. You're gonna thank yourself for doing that. And then I think I would love people to stop contributing to the culture of fear around this because like there's a lot of scary language around it. Like this will like so many like top executives are like, oh, we're gonna replace all developers, or we're gonna replace like this role, that role over there. Well, please remember that your customers are people, right? And the way you signal things to them is like, we don't care about people, and maybe that will not endear them to you, to your company, right? So for one, even for that simple reason, and like in general, you're a human too. Like we were joking with some developers of like, actually, can we write a system to replace like an executive? It doesn't seem very hard. So like don't dig your like don't dig that hole maybe for whole humanity. And I think it also like will help because if you want to empower your team to use AI, not scaring them around that will go a long way. Like make it safe.
There is a wonderful episode of The Twilight Zone from the 50s and 60s where like robots come to a factory and in the end they replace the leader of the factory and not the workers. So maybe
we should watch it more because We are humans. Like, if we're trying to replace all humans, what's our values as humanity? I question that.
So last question for you, and we'll wrap up. Let's say it's 2 years from now. It's December 2027. Are we still talking about this?
Yeah, it depends, right? So it depends on, like, is LLM still a thing? I think it's still a thing, unless we discovered something entirely different. Like, that's the only case where we don't. Um, I think the patterns that I have, anti-patterns, like I started from what are the fundamental limitations of this thing we have, and unless we find ways to kind of actually solve them, right? So a continuously learning AI, but even continuously learning AI is interesting because it doesn't remember the details of everything it learns. It just has kind of like, oh, I read about this thing, I can look things up, and you still need this knowledge, external knowledge to guide details about things. So I think a lot of those, I was trying to build those kind of patterns and so on around the things that don't change, and maybe my solutions will be a bit different, the patterns, but I think the problem space of how we react to them kind of stays roughly the same. At least I'm pretty confident about 2026. I try to not predict things. I think we're fine for 2026. I think probably it's relevant. We probably learned a lot by 2027 because I learned a lot in a month currently. But I think it'll still be relevant.
I think relevant, and I have no idea what it's going to look like.
Exactly.
What relevance is going to look like. We shall see.
Yeah.
Well, Lada, thank you. Like, what a great conversation. I really love hearing about like the realities of somebody who's not just using this, but like really exploring it and thinking about the implications. So I will put the talk in the show, or your video in the show notes, and some other good stuff in the show notes. So check them out. There will be good goodies in there. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really love the conversation too. I appreciate it.
Excellent. Well, that's the show. Engineering Unblocked is brought to you by Swarmia, the engineering intelligence platform that's trusted by some of the best software companies in the world. Thanks for listening. See you next time.